All right, welcome to the Green Room. We're here with DisrupTV. I'm here with my amazing co-host, Vala Afshar, our producer, Elle, and of course, our two great guests. We're going to go in reverse order, do some quick intros, help me know where you're coming in from, and of course, what are we talking about today in a very, very short blurb before we kick off the show. So, David, what are we talking about today? Where are you?
Well, what I'm hoping is we talk about the Managers Handbook and the discoveries that I had over the last 3 years when I was researching the difference between, the everyday manager and the people that were so amazing at getting things done, and those discoveries along the way.
Oh, no. Stay focused, make better decisions, and crush your competition, as you say. Very, very cool. All right, Mike, welcome. Where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
Hey, Ray, I'm coming in from Westport, Connecticut, and I'm going to talk about whatever you and Vala want to talk about. You two are in charge and large. So, but I was the author of Never Enough. I've had a life of a variety of different positions, and through everything, I've made plenty of opportunity to make mistakes and learned a lot along the way, and love to share whatever I can.
Amazing book, really talking about life of excellence, agility, and meaning. So very, very cool. Well, hey, with that, turn it back to you, Elle. Let's kick it off.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce, and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. Send us questions using hashtag DisrupTV, and Ray and I will do our best to answer them live. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO, founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see Ray on TV, technology and business news every day. He's on Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, CNBC. In my opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of The Pursuit of Social Business, but that's in the past. His new book, Boundless, A New Mindset for Unlimited Business Success. I don't have it with me right now. Will be available, and it's constantly available in every bookstore, but Mike has it, and that's more important. This book is about business flow, a new mindset, and unlimited business success. You're going to hear the word flow a lot, and that's because of Vala and Henry King. And of course, executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational and insightful tweets. When he's not hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce, you can find him on TV, on business outlets like Bloomberg, and posting insightful analyses on ZDNet. So thanks a lot for everyone for being us. But it's not about us. It's about our amazing guests. And wow, we have some amazing guests today, Vala.
Unbelievable honor, privilege for us to have. We only get the best-selling authors and titans of industry to come on our show. And our first guest is no exception. Mike Hayes is Chief Operating Officer at VMware and author of Never Enough, a Navy SEAL commander on living a life of excellence, agility, and meaning. Mike is the Chief Operating Officer at VMware, responsible for VMware's worldwide business operations, transformation, and acceleration of the company's SaaS transition. Prior to VMware, Mike served as the Senior Vice President and Head of Strategic Operations for Cognizant Technologies, where he ran a $2 billion P&L for the largest financial services clients. Mike spent 20 years in the U.S. Navy SEALs, where his career began as one of 19 graduates from a class of 120. His last job in the Navy was the commanding officer of the SEAL Team 2, which included 10 months as commander of 2,000-person Special Operations Task Force in southern Afghanistan. Mike was selected as White House Fellow and served 2 years as Director of Defense Policy, Strategy, and National Security Council. Mike has worked directly with two presidents, George W. Bush and President Obama. His military decorations include the Bronze Star for Valor in Combat in Iraq, Bronze Star for Afghanistan, and Defense Superior Service Medal from White House. He is the best-selling author of Never Enough, my highest book recommendation of 2023. Quite an emotional book. I found myself in instances tearing up reading his book. And I can't say that about the last book I've read that had such an emotional connection with me. You can follow Mike on X at This Is Mike Hayes, and he's super prolific on LinkedIn. So a must follow on LinkedIn. Welcome, Mike, to DisrupTV. And sorry I had to cut your bio short. We only have a half hour.
What a way to start. Hey, Vala, thank you so much. Ray, what a pleasure to be here. Let me start by just saying thanks to each of you two for all of the incredible impact that you've had, not just on the great nation of the United States, but for the world and the planet. You two are amazing. And of course, Salesforce, Constellation Research, also amazing. So thanks to each of you. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, well, hey, thanks a lot. And we're really here to share and learn from each other. And that's really some of the great things that inside your book, right? I mean, you've got a unique track record at high-performing organizations. Like some of these are some of the tops in their field. Didn't matter where you were, whether it's Bridgewater, Cognizant, VMware at the point, right? I mean, but 20 years in the SEALs, 2 White Houses, right? That's crazy. So, and now you've put all these things together. You got Bronze Stars from combat, right? High pressure meetings. I mean, the White House Situation Room may have looked simple compared to what's going on with boardrooms, or maybe it's the other way around. Who knows? And that's what we really want to learn from you. All these different organizations, different roles, different leadership styles, and command and control structures, and ways that people govern. What patterns did you see emerge that come out in terms of great leadership, great management in all those different kind of environments? Because you have amazing pattern sets that you can actually draw on.
Wow, great question to start. Thank you, Ray. I would say the most important thing to me is almost starting where Vala ended, which is it's that life is really about people, whether you're in the SEALs, whether you're in White Houses, or in any sort of a boardroom in any enterprise of any size. The thing that I've recognized through time is really comes from wisdom, which is a series of learnings from a bunch of things you wish you could have done differently or wish you came out differently. So, I've had the fortune and misfortune of living through all of the ups and downs of everything that our nation has asked of our military forces. And I've buried 70 friends, as almost all of my friends.
Oh, wow.
Era. And so I've got perspective. I've been shot at, I've been rocketed, I've amputated a teammate's leg. I've jumped out of a building that was rigged to explode. And I'm not unique. Every SEAL has their stories that are very similar. And so, with all of that, what I would say is that the most important thing is being a positive presence in other people's lives. Living a life of meaning and purpose is really what pulls people up. Where the average of the people we hang out with is something I always say. And so I like to hang out with guys like you, Vala and Ray, because you pull me up. You're smarter, you're faster, you're stronger. And so that the first thing I would say is really common across everything is just that desire for excellence. The title of the book, which my mom and my publisher originally hated, was Never Enough. Was how I'm never enough. What does that mean? And I would just say it's really about striving for excellence. And I often say you're only excellent if you know you're never excellent enough.
Wow, that is deep. So
it's you're radically transparent in the book. You share some real personal insights. You with honor and grace reference your friends who lost their lives on several missions. You end the book with a story about your daughter working at a clinic in Dominican Republic, and I'm literally crying reading your book. I don't know why I'm publicly, a few 100,000 watched this show. I don't know why I'm saying this, but it was such a graceful, such an impactful summary of excellence, agility, and meaning. And you brought a lot of that to VMware. In the last few years, you've steered the company through incredible complex business transformation. These were not quite life and death decisions that you had to make as a 20-year SEAL and a commander, but really important decisions on multidimensional surface areas. And this selling from perpetual license to SaaS model is incredible pivot. and an inflection point in VMware's history. Why is this transformation important, and how did you apply these incredible SEAL lessons? And by the way, we're not smarter and stronger. Definitely not stronger. Ray, he can do 50 pull-ups. Like you and I combined can do 5. Yeah, and I'm doing one.
I don't know. I've never been able to do one.
So talk to us about the transformation at VMware and how your leadership principles of excellence, agility, and meaning applies to executives running large organizations today.
Vala, that question is almost an extension of Ray's. To me, when you think about software as a service and the as a service, movement, if you will, it's all about one thing. It's value. It's value shifting to the customer, the consumer. And so I think it's so incredibly important to really think about doing more for others than self. And when you solve hard problems, then you share in the victory and in the win. And whether it's life or in business, you share in the economic value that you create. And so for me, I think like as VMware has pivoted from perpetual licenses and potentially sometimes like every single software vendor, sometimes selling things that end up on the shelf and don't get used. And so as you pivot to the as a service world, you are really only helping, you are enabling the customer to only pay for what they value and what they use. Now that's more risk for a business. Look, it's a lot better for me to sell you something you never use and me to put money in my pocket. I and all the leadership of VMware and the board, like nobody feels as good about that as the model where we get paid for the value we create in your business. And first and foremost, you get more out of the deal than we do. But the thing is, when we win together, the classic saying, rising tide floats all boats, it's cliche for a reason. But that transformation externally has been very, very fun, very successful. But with that, there's also an internal transformation because it's not like in a large enterprise. You both know this better than I do. You can't just flip a switch and all of a sudden everything's changed. It takes work, it takes effort. And it connects back to that first question as well, Vala.
Great answer.
Yeah, a lot of great stuff. We talk about teams, players, coaches, everyone else, teams, teammates, self, right? And relationships. And these relationships are hard to build over time, especially high-performing teams. What is the important piece between bringing together relationships and tying that leader with technologies, relationships, and people? Because those are easy intersections. They're all very, very different areas. How do you see that coming together? And sometimes technology helps. Sometimes technology is the barrier. Sometimes the leadership styles are different, right? And it's almost like there are patterns here as well that you probably have unveiled over the years to say, hey, this is going to be a great team. This is going to be a team that needs some work. This is going to need some teams that we're going to actually use something else to actually improve that work, right? And they all come together.
It's really amazing. The thing, Ray, that I think you're hitting on is that technology is a means to an end. A lot of times we can hold up technology as the thing. Technology is never the thing. The thing is what technology creates. What does it enable you to do? What superpower does it give you? How does it help you save time? How does it make you more secure? What is the outcome? And so I think a lot of times we miss the opportunity to really focus on outcome-based thinking. And that's why I think, and Vala wrote about this, with Henry King in Boundless. It's moving from, independence to interdependence and recognizing that it is a team and we all come together. As we've come out of COVID, I've been often asked, how do you think about resilience? Well, in the SEALs, whether we could be absolutely up or absolutely down, but what matters the most is relativism. Because on any team, somebody is always relatively up and somebody else is always relatively down. And so the person who's relatively up has to reach in, help the person who's relatively down. Because today I'm up, tomorrow I'm going to be the one who's down. My grandfather was at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, on the day of infamy. And he had lived a life of tons of wisdom that I garnered from him. And he's my greatest hero. And I can't wait to see him again someday, not too soon. Because as he said, Mike, don't die for your country, go on living for it. But the reason I brought him up now was because I was just reminded as I was giving that last talk about relatively up and relatively down. In the words of my grandfather, when you are down, the best thing to do is find somebody who else is further down than you are and pull up.
Wow.
So these are interesting patterns, right? The reason I'm going to dwell a little bit longer here is that kind of portfolio management of a team is not easy to learn, right? I mean, you're creating not only leadership, you're creating interdependence, and you're also trying to manage, right? You can't burn a team too hard, too long, right? They're going to burn out, right? If you operate at such a high performance level, they still need to find breaks. They still need to find, some way to actually recover. And so that cycle, not only in a team like, in the Navy SEALs, but that cycle in a company going through merger acquisition or going through a product launch or going through, a hostile takeover, right? All these things, right, come back into that leadership. How do people prepare for that? How would you actually tell a team like to get ready for that? Or is that just coming because you've had training in other areas?
Well, I think it's like everything it's a little bit of nature versus nurture question. And I'm a big person on nurture. Like you can learn. Of course, we all have innate, gifts, abilities, skills, and passions, but we get better through time by being in hard situations. And I think about what's critical to that question to me, Ray, is it's a culture question. It's when somebody succeeds or fails, you can't yet know if they failed. You have to go down the logic tree one more node and say, did you fail and learn? If you failed and learned, then you succeeded. But I would also say really critically important for leaders to help have a culture where that learning can be brought to the rest of the organization. So you have systematic enterprise learning from individuals. And when you create the system, that's beauty. I often hold up in the transformation of VMware. A lot of people like to say, oh, the technology is not good enough. There's everybody knows the engineering community wants another tool or another widget or another whiz-bang cool thing. And the analysts need another thing. And at some point, everybody's got a different opinion on what piece of technology works the best and what they want. It's not unlike boots in the SEAL teams. Everybody's got a different opinion on what the best boot to wear in the rain is. But as we think about all these things, how do we strike the right balance between central decision-making and complete autonomy? And, there's being thoughtful and intentional about those decisions. And those decisions in cultures that are great are decisions that think broadly and systematically across the whole enterprise.
Do you have a recommendation for best Arctic boots?
That's funny.
Yeah, go barefoot and give it a try.
Yeah.
Builds character, Ray.
That's awesome. Well, he does start the book with, pick the hard path. So, and we'll talk about that. But let's extend the conversation on culture and a culture of agility. You've written a lot about agility in the book and explored its relationship with excellence and meaning. So in Never Enough, what does agility mean to you?
Agility is like one of those words like leadership. Everybody's got a different definition and it never sounds quite right because there's always something it's missing. But to me, my thoughts about agility are really like the way SEALs plan for missions. You see, we go into a mission with a plan, but the plan from the beginning is for that plan to change. And so, what I describe is that there's no playbooks. You have one playbook and it's called the meta playbook, which is the playbook for how to create the playbook in the moment. I know that sounds maybe like a tongue twister, but it's like I've gone into enterprises, plenty of enterprises that have had an app go down and they're losing money or, something has crashed, a data center, whatever it is. And everybody's like, well, we had a playbook for that. And you're like, no, you can have 100 playbooks. That's not going to win anything. You need one playbook. It's how do you, and this is a SEAL mission, how do you define define the vision that you want, the outcome, and then the strategy, which is how you're going to get there. So the vision is the where, the strategy is the how, and then the execution. But importantly on the strategy, to me, it's, look, there are a lot of experienced people. How do you have a culture that pulls all of that experience in and says, look, there's a bunch of different ways to risk adjust, to take the minimum amount of risk to achieve the agreed outcome. How do you converge on that path of minimal risk to achieve an outcome? And those are conversations, and that's about a decision-making system. In my past life, I was the person that made decisions for, what missions our nation's sons and daughters went on, and when we drop bombs from planes onto the ground. It's not that was just my job. And so I've thought a lot about decision making, and it's got to be a system. I'm the decider, but I'm more importantly, I'm an input separately. And so, because a lot of times my decision, if it automatically equals my input, I've just not created a decision-making system. I've just created an autocracy.
Yes.
So what I want to do is have a whole variety of inputs and then have the conversation so I can separate the data that people are looking at and separate the logic, because we might disagree on we need to look at different data. We need to look at, or we disagree on the logic that it gets applied to the data, or we disagree where that logic and data take us. And by being able to have those conversations with great spirit, great intent, and great collaboration, as you also wrote about, Vala, I think that's the most important thing, is respecting others and celebrating that a lot of people think differently and a lot of different experiences really, really matter and drive outcomes.
You know, Mike, that's a great point. And you talk about that when you talk about learn how to think, not what to think, and that agility. The other half of that, when you talked about that, was really gain authority by giving it away.
Yeah.
How does that work? Right?
Well,
The common notion, I mean, I kind of do know, but the common notion of leadership is like, well, why would I give that away? So what does that do when you create that?
Yeah, Ray, it's such a fun topic. I'd love to spend an hour on that alone. I'll be quick. I think the most important thing is, how do you self-actualize? Do you need to be the one on the stage getting the award, or would you rather have one of your people getting recognized? I very, very deeply would rather have people around me be recognized, because their success is my success. And I don't need my name up in lights. And so as soon as you get to the point of your career where you no longer need any sort of a credit, because you have that confidence that the recognition just doesn't matter, then from there, that liberates you to really think differently. And I think I just made fun of people who define leadership, and so let me define it. Leaders, of course, we all know they need to know how to lead and follow. But the thing that very few people understand is that the most important is knowing when to do which. And it's my hypothesis that you're mostly better building a system when you can lead from the rear, when you can watch your organization either make decisions and win or make decisions and learn. Both of those are beautiful for an organization. And so that takes that comfort, Ray, to be able to sit in the back and say, hey, I'm going to watch other people either succeed or learn.
I know you mentioned in the book about being deliberately intrusive, and you said intrusive in a way where it's in the spirit of helping others. I can count on two hands the number of people that proactively reached out to me, knowing that I had a book coming to market. And you and Ray are two people that you called me on a Saturday, Mike. And you're like, I see you have a book coming out. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about? You started giving me like a master class on how to bring a book to market, only for me to realize that I thought I knew a lot until I learned a little. So you didn't think about, it was a weekend. You didn't think about that. You and I, had just met this year. You contacted me in the spirit of helping me achieve more. And in the process of meeting you this year, you introduced me to a brilliant CEO who's building technology in a way to bring meaning and contextual intelligence to people, knowledge workers. And he's building a company called Ren. I want you to tell us, what is Ren all about, and what was the gravitational pull for you to join this incredible team building an AI-powered platform that's going to bring some meaning to people's lives?
Yeah, no, Vala, I think the intrusive is so important. I've, as mentioned, buried about 70 friends, and unfortunately, many of them have died by suicide. And I've become unfortunately, very comfortable asking people if they've ever considered things like harm to self. Those aren't easy conversations. And 99 times out of 100, it's cringy. It's like, hey, no way. It's awkward, whatever. But I'll take 99 awkwards for one yes every single time. Because, what we didn't talk about is I got a large advance for that book. All of my speaking fees, every single penny goes to a 501c3 I started that pays off mortgages for Gold Star widows. And so with the proceeds, I've paid off 7 mortgages for women whose names I don't use. That's their story to tell. Now, so connecting that over, it's about relationships. And that's what Ren is. Ren Systems, I would tell you, the DisrupTV, the way to disrupt the world is to strengthen relationships. And there's so much noise out there that to use AI to figure out in brief, everybody you've ever communicated with, hitting your APIs for your whatever, your different emails, your Outlook, et cetera, your iOS contacts, cleaning and deduping that data set, and then reading the entire internet every second, and then giving you a feed that the more you interact with, the more it becomes specialized to you. It lets you know what's happening with your friends. And Vala, remember, we were both in New York City. I was on Ren when I was killing time, waiting to go do yoga with the Prime Minister of India. And I literally had in my feed, Vala Afshar is doing yoga with Modi. And I was like texting you, and I'm like, dude, I'm going to see you in a second. But more importantly, rather than celebrating like that, there's also times what Ren Systems allows you to do is be there when your friends have a bad quarter, when their company's getting sued, or whenever there's any sort of news that you need to be reaching out to. So I would really strongly recommend to anybody who cares about being there for others is to go to rensystems.com and download Ren and use it. I'm deeply believe that it is about impact and meaning and purpose in the world. And that to me is what Ren does.
It embodies your philosophy, and it's frictionless. And as you just mentioned, you could literally be in a city new to both of us and have a random collision with the Prime Minister of India, which is pretty awesome.
Hey, this goes to that fact, never meaningful enough, right? This is the way to do it. So make differences where they will count the most. And this is what you have done. We're here with Mike Hayes, Chief Operating Officer, VMware, author, Never Enough, a Navy SEAL commander on living a life of excellence, agility, and meaning. You can follow Mike at This is Mike Hayes on X. So thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Vala.
Safe travels.
Take care.
Thank you. Cheers. Amazing book, amazing person. He's just as lovely in person. He's the real deal. He's the real deal. And he can do 50 push-ups if you're not push-ups, pull-ups, which again, if you've ever tried to do pull-ups, that's a silly number. Our next guest may be able to do 50 pull-ups as well. He's an incredibly accomplished person. David Dodson, author of the Managers Handbook, 5 simple steps to build a team, stay focused, make better decisions, and crush your competition. David Dodson is faculty of Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. David teaches one of the most sought-after courses at Stanford. And in 2023, The Economist listed his course as one of the 3 hottest courses at Stanford. David's recent recipient of the MSX Teaching Excellence Award and a 6-time speaker in the Graduation Last Lecture Series. David's career began as a consultant at McKinsey, and then becoming a serial entrepreneur, where David operated 6 companies as CEO or executive chairman. Dave has since served as board member of more than 40 public and private companies and has been active investor in over 150 businesses. David, just like you, Ray, is frequently on TV, business commentator on CNBC, Fox News, and all the major media publications. In 2000, David co-founded Sanku, I hope I'm pronouncing it properly, which developed the only successful technology to fortify grains with life-saving micronutrients in the rural African mills. The award-winning technology was named Time Magazine's 100 Best Inventions and received the IoT Evolution Product of the Year award by Vodafone. Through this work, Sanku has saved and improved the lives of over 5 million rural families in Africa. Amazing. You can follow David on Twitter at David Dodson307. Welcome, David, to DisrupTV.
I'm glad to be here. It's a little embarrassing or a little intimidating following Mike, because I'm 62 and I'm not sure I can get off the floor as many times as he can do a pull-up. So I'm going to do my best, though.
Navy SEALs are just they're a different breed.
But when we're doing mental pull-ups and breaking them into digestible, snackable tips and tactics,
all right, we'll go with that.
You're cool with that. Actually, what I really liked about the book is really you're helping people break down problems, right? Often in most people's minds, things get so complicated, they get overwhelmed, they can't even figure out what to focus on, how to reprioritize or prioritize on the important piece. And half the battle is just getting that first step in place, right? When did you come to the realization that that's the one thing holding back managers from being successful?
Yeah, so I made this evolution in my life where I was a manager. I was, as you said, I was the CEO of a handful of companies. And then I moved into investing. And in side by side, I started teaching when I came back to Stanford at the business school in the faculty. And at some point, I got fascinated with the idea that there were just some people out there that were just so much better at getting things done than others.
Yeah.
And then these kind of larger than life CEOs and leaders. So I spent about 3 years just studying them and observing. The book I wrote, The Managers Handbook, is not about how I ran companies. It happens to be how I wish I had run companies, but it was really the curation of this observation that I made about other managers. And what I found is that the differentiating factors among the people who are great at getting things done and everybody else was really skill based. And I know that's a little bit kind of boring and, and I'll talk about it, but that was the differentiating factor. And by the way, there were no exceptions. And I was looking at people like, Steve Jobs and Mike Zuckerberg and Bezos. I mean, people that we think they have X-ray vision and they can see around corners and they're larger than life, but they didn't actually have red capes. They just mastered the basics. And then they went and made sure their whole organization mastered the basics. So then I had this conundrum, which is, okay, I've found these 5 skill areas. How do I break it down in a way that just like people like everybody who's listening today can understand? And I was watching somebody play the piano and I got thinking, to play the piano, you first have to learn the difference between a sharp and a flat and the difference between the black keys and the white keys and what the pedals do. And then you put it all together and you're making music. And I started to think about these skills and it was exactly the same as there's a bunch of little basics, each one of which is not that hard to do. You put them together and you master these skills.
Wow.
What I love about it is the just common sense simplicity in the way you guide the reader, like running meetings. Like you talk about John F. Kennedy would always call on people in reverse order of seniority and influence. Because if you called on the most influential person in a meeting, then the folks maybe below her in the organization will tend to gravitate toward their thoughts and beliefs and vision. And I thought, wow, I don't remember the last time I ran a meeting where I was deliberate about calling on the intern or the single contributor. We tend to gravitate to the VPs and the high person's opinion, the hippos in the room. Talk about, running meetings as an example and other great nuggets of wisdom, including like the one I just mentioned, calling on the lowest seniority first.
Yeah, I like the example of running meetings. So one of the skills is the ability to seek and take advice. And we all participate in meetings. In fact, the average manager is in a meeting 23 hours a day. And the idea is that to make that meeting time as valuable as possible, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to make the best possible decisions, frankly, in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of people, right? So I looked at the people who were just exceptional at running things and how they ran meetings, and they all ran meetings with certain structures in place. By the way, each one was a little different than the next one. But in the book, what I wanted to do is I wanted to sort of pull out those easy to implement nuggets and harmonize it into kind of one way to run a meeting. So, you just mentioned the idea about calling on people in reverse order of seniority. If you really want to pull out the wisdom of the crowd and get the benefit of having everybody in the room together, that is one of the easiest things you can do. And you can do it tomorrow morning. Everything in the book, in that chapter on how to run a meeting, does not require this massive restructuring of how you do things and everybody's got to recode themselves. It's like, hey, let's all do these 6 things. We can all do them starting right now, and we're going to improve our ability to make good decisions. And by the way, we're going to get out of this meeting 20 minutes earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Starting with clarifying questions, making sure everybody participates. It's just, all 3 of us have managed large teams, and I just wish I had that structure and that recipe to go from a good to better to best. And I just want to follow up with that because I love the section about, which I think is part of running meetings and just collaborating and adding value, is getting feedback. And you laid out 6 parts on feedback. And you start with expectations and then measurement. How are you going to measure it? And feedback itself. You ask about any obstacles that may be there. You offer your support and you make sure there's alignment. I just appreciate the recipe and super clear, crisp guidance you provide in the book, because again, I've been giving feedback and receiving feedback all my life, just never thought about codifying it in a way that is meaningful and scalable. So any thoughts about feedback?
Oh yeah. And Vala, I love the fact that you sort of described it as a recipe, because that's what I wanted to do. The book's called The Managers Handbook. And the reason why I named it that way is that it's not supposed to be like a victory lap of what I did in my life or how to run things the way I did it. It's really supposed to be a how-to manual. And I told my wife, Wendy, when I was sat down to write this book, I said, I don't want this to be a book to read. I want it to be a book to be used. And so in the example of how to give feedback, so the first of the 5 skills is the ability to build a team, right? One of the ways that you build a team is, of course, you're giving people feedback along the way. And we talk about instant performance feedback and so forth. And in that, I thought about, okay, well, I could sort of talk about concepts of how to give good feedback, but people aren't going to be able to implement that tomorrow morning. Everything, this whole book is a tomorrow morning kind of book. And I broke it down into 6 steps. And they're easy to learn. And so when you're giving somebody feedback, just follow these 6 steps. It's a simple formula, or as you said, Vala, it's a recipe. You do it a few times, it becomes second nature. And if you follow that recipe, you will put yourself instantly in the top 20% of managers who give feedback. And we all know, either as a manager who's given feedback or a person who's received feedback, that most of the feedback we get is junk, because it's not delivered properly. What's in the manager's head, the boss, they know what behavior needs to change. They just don't know how to deliver it in a way that the person that's hearing the feedback can go, okay, I get it. I got it, boss. I'll work on that tomorrow.
And my sense is, if they follow your recipe with certain discipline, you can become not a cook, but a chef, meaning you increase your ability for situational awareness to apply some of these principles when you're maybe pulled into an emergency meeting where you're not in control of the meeting. I just feel that the tactical advice you give can help people build certain muscles that they think they have, but they don't quite have, like some of the incredible CEOs you mentioned in terms of your research. Sorry, Ray. I'm kind of geeking out on his book because it's pretty awesome. It's a tomorrow book. I mean, it literally is a playbook you can take to work the next day and implement. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
It is awesome. But one of the hardest things in that book is really that notion on hiring, right? And really, because you don't often get to hire your team from scratch, right? It's a rotation process, right? And you've got to figure out how to pull those pieces together. And I can't find, I remember there's a Vince Lombardi quote you quoted is very, very important, right? But these outcomes are super important as you hire for outcomes. How do you do that when, I don't know, the company's moving at 150 miles an hour, you got to change 3 of the 4 tires? Like, how do you do that?
Well, it starts with part 1, which is the ability to build a team. And of course, you have to have the right inputs. So the first chapter of the book is about how to hire well. And I want to tell you a quick story. So when I was the CEO of a company and we were hiring a fair amount of people because we were growing at about 100% a year, I knew that we were not doing a good job hiring. I could just look at the turnover numbers and tell that we weren't doing a good job of hiring. And by the way, turnover is just the people who either self-select out or you're pushing them out. It's not differentiating between the A and the B players. So it's even worse. So I went and I collected, I think it was about a dozen books on hiring. Told everybody, I'll see you in a week. Read all the books. It was quite literally several thousand pages. And in the end, I had about like 20 pages. And I realized that, being good at hiring, you don't have to read 20 books. Okay. There's about, I think my chapter on hiring is maybe 20 pages on it. And it's distilling all of the known best practices of hiring into one chapter. Now, why don't people do it? Everybody knows you have to be good at hiring, but it's a little bit hard work, right? It's so easy to glance at someone's email, go visit with them, see if you kind of connect. Is there likability? We all call it gut feel. Gut feel is actually lazy. Being really good at hiring is harder to do. And by the way, there are multiple things in this book that you'll look at and you'll go, you know what, that's kind of hard to do. But if you really want to succeed, you got to do it. And by the way, it costs you about 2.5 times someone's salary in total cost when you make a bad hire. And it takes about 80 hours to undo it. So, if you want to be lazy, trade that 80 hours for a little extra hours on the front end. So then I put it into a step-by-step formula on how you go about hiring. And again, just like the meeting notion that we were talking about with Vala earlier, I wanted to pick the things that you could do in the next morning. So for example, I explained why it's essential that when you're interviewing, you interview as a team. I'll give you just a quick example why. If the three of us were all interviewing somebody and we were interviewing them together, and then we got together and said, hey, what do you think about so-and-so? We're all making our opinions based on a separate set of data because we've all seen different data. We have to see the same data and evaluate that together. The second reason why that's a bad idea is you will always defer to the more senior person if you all have separate sets of data. But if you've all looked at the same thing and Ray says, what I found is that da-da-da, and Vala says, well, no, wait a minute. I'm not sure I agree with that because remember earlier when he said this or later when she said that, and you're like, you know what? You're right, Vala. You don't get those kind of dynamics. No. So the hiring chapter just talks about a handful of very fundamental things that you can do to increase your hiring rate. And I'll leave you with this. When I was running a company and we were in 7 countries and we were 0 for 7 on country directors, we implemented this. And after that, we were 7 for 7. So it just works.
That's awesome. Well, you talk about people leaving, and certainly companies all want to avoid, regrettable attrition. Folks that you bring, successful hiring, only to not be able to keep the talented person for a variety of reasons. Maybe because they're not reading your book. So it could be poor management or a variety of reasons. So, and one thing that's hard to do, not just hiring, is is the 360 process that you referenced, which you say, if it's done properly, could be a massive competitive advantage. Now, I've worked for companies that had a 360 process, and as you mentioned in the book, they're not curated, often can be hurtful commentary. People are surprised by the negativity and maybe the radical transparency in the process. So you talk about in the book, the 3 C's. You have to curate, you have to create a plan, and you have to close the loop. Tell us, why the 360 process can actually be a massive competitive weapon. And are there companies that do it well based on the size? Is it harder to do in a large company? I'm in a 75,000 person company. Ray's running a 75 person company. Is it easier for me to conduct a 360 or Ray, or it has no dependency in terms of size and complexity of your org structure?
Well, let me answer it in reverse order. So the last thing you said is whether it's easier to implement it with a larger company and a smaller company. The concepts are absolutely identical. Okay. It just is more work when you have more people because you have to push the norms and the culture of the 360 deeper into a larger organization. So it just takes a little bit of time. There's more scale, but the concepts are the same. Okay. And the kind of the typical thing with the 360 is, oh, we should do 360s because I read it on a blog or something, and then you Google 360 questions to answer.
Don't do that.
And you send out. There's plenty of apps and so forth that you can do to collect the information. And then you just dump the data onto the individual. And that creates all sorts of problems. First of all, we live in a world where we say things on the keyboard that we would never say face to face. So it's even more dangerous now. But if you just dump all this uncurated data on someone, you're running the risk of actually hurting someone's feelings, but sending them a mixed message. So what you want to do is you curate the data, which is what you just mentioned, and then you create a plan. So let's say that I'm responsible for getting the data on a 360. I look at the data and I look for common themes. And I see, okay, common theme is that this person is coming off a little bit aloof and people think it's arrogance or something or whatever, but I've identified a common theme. I don't just say, hey, you kind of come off as arrogant, go fix that. So that's why you create a plan. And you say, so here's how we're going to address this. And then the last thing is you got to close the loop with the people who provided the data. And again, it's all recipe. Okay. So you do it this way. You say, here's what I heard. Here's what I'm going to work on right away. Here's what I'm going to work on, but I'm going to wait until whenever. And here's what I'm not going to work on. And here's why. because the people who provide the data also need to know that they were heard along the way. And then the book kind of outlines, going to your second question about implementation, how you implement 360. You don't just like shove it out to the organization and say, let's all be hip now and do 360s. It takes a while to roll it out in a way that people have confidence. But imagine the power of the information you have from your workforce if you've done a really good job of pulling that information out of what they're thinking, and then you create a plan around that. And that's what the book talks about.
This
in about
is hard.
a whopping 12 pages. It's not
this
that
is
complicated.
hard to do. It's hard to do, but you have a very prescriptive. You have a very the book is full of precision, but it's precise, small steps. It's almost like Kaizen approach. There's nothing that you introduce in your 20-page on feedback or 12-page on multi-dimensional complex thinking. It's just a series of logical steps, but it's hard work. Again, I'm not sure if I've ever worked for a company
that does it that way. Yes. So yeah, no, we can definitely see it that way. I actually wanted to spend some time. We'd be remiss if we missed the last chapter talking about quality, right? And I think that quality thing is really, really important that you have right there, right? Thinking about how you get there. You have a chapter that talks about walk behind the tractor. What does that mean, right? So it's not intuitive to walk behind the tractor.
Yeah, that I saved the fifth skill area, which is an obsession with quality, which, by the way, Ray, was probably the most surprising observation I had for the last, because it is my favorite. And I think that chapter, Walk Behind the Tractor, is my favorite. I want to just say why an obsession with quality ended up being so important among these leaders. It's not about sort of take care of the customers and business ethic and so forth. It was that high quality is the best way to make money, because it's harder to bring in a new customer than keep a customer. You're only going to keep customers if they're satisfied with you. It gives you pricing power. You attract the best people, you keep the best people, and so forth. So there's this sort of flywheel effect. But a lot of people have like this incorrect view of qualities. Bain and Company did a study on CEOs and what they thought of their quality. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. So 83% of them said that they offered a superior product or service. Guess what? They checked with their customers. It was 8%.
Oh.
That is like that's the goal.
Order of magnitude. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
And by the way, they call it the Lake Wobegon effect, based on that Garrison Keillor
I love it.
NPR thing where he said that all of the students were above average. This inflated view of where we are. So Walk Behind the Tractor comes from where I grew up. So I grew up in rural Colorado. My dad manufactured farm equipment, and you sell farm equipment through farm dealers. So he never sold his equipment directly to the end user. But what he wanted to do is spend time with the end user. So on the weekends, I'd go out with my dad, and we would literally walk behind the tractor, where he would have a little handheld recorder, and he would talk to the farmer and find out exactly what is happening with his product. And then he could go fix it again. He didn't ask his managers. He didn't do NPS surveys. He walked behind the tractor. Well, a common everyday example of that, or a more contemporary example, is like Intuit. And they call it Follow Me Home. Well, you think about Intuit, QuickBooks and TurboTax and so forth. They have dominated these sectors for literally decades. And you think about what the software does isn't actually that fancy, right? I mean, you're just like filling out forms to do your taxes, right? Well, the reason why Cook and his company have dominated that for so long is that they follow them home. They essentially walk behind the tractor, and they're always ahead of the competition on what their customers are thinking. And so that chapter talks about concepts of how they do that. And it's everything from Intuit, a high-tech company, all the way to Safelite Auto Glass. How prosaic could it get to replacing chipped windshields? But that's why they've stayed in front for so long.
Don't be a legend in your own mind and walk behind the tractor. Put those two things together and you're ready to go. This is amazing. We're here with David Dodson, author of the Managers Handbook. You can follow him at Dave Dodson at 307, and you can catch all his books on Amazon. And if you're lucky enough to take a class at GSB, you're going to want to take that class. So
You and I need to audit some courses and get in
We just
David's
gotta hang
class.
out
Just
at
sit in the
Stanford.
back and just listen. Yeah, that's what
You
we
and
should be
I
doing.
should, you come by. We'll hang out at Stanford.
Anytime. You're my guest.
Come by
Anytime.
at Stanford, hang out at the house, and then we'll go over hang out at Harvard and MIT. Like we'll do
I'll even slip you into some of the really good classes.
Okay.
Let's talk more afterwards.
That's awesome.
All right.
That,
Thank you so much for being on the show. We'll catch you in the green room if you're there, and go from there. So,
thank you, David.
Thank you, David. And there it goes. Another episode, 337, flying by so quickly. Hopefully everybody caught every second.
Yeah, you're not surprised why Mike and David are best-selling authors because, in the last hour or so, just incredible wisdom. And it is a recipe book with David because it's tactical in nature, meaning you can use the book right away. You can learn from it right away. You can literally take his book and run a meeting more effectively the next day. And Mike, as David said, is an intimidating person.
I would say Mike's book, what was interesting about it is it gives you a framework in terms of changing your mind shift. Right. You're really looking at things in a different way. You might observe some things you hadn't put it all together. Right. Yeah. And when you read David's book, I'm like, I'm ready to go. I want to go. I want to make this thing happen,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And those two together, I think would be a very interesting panel, like putting them having them together.
It would be amazing. And then at the end, they could do a pull-up contest.
No pull-up contest.
By the way, Mike in person, he's like Captain America. He's like 6'4", jacked. You figured he had to play in, basketball or football, and then once you find out he was a SEAL for 20 years, he is super, super intimidating. Okay, speaking of great, amazing guests, next week we have one of our favorite guests, and we haven't talked to her in a few years. So I'm really anxious to connect with her, Frances Frey.
Oh, wow.
And Ann Morris. Frances was on the show. It had to be pre-COVID. Yes. And she was just amazing. And Ann Morris, authors of Move Fast and Fix Things. That should be everyone's mantra. Move fast, be helpful, and fix.
I think I break things when I move fast. So
I don't know anyone that moves as fast as you do. That is true. But you do fix a lot of things. And Patrick Hinz, author of Failure, counterintuitive. Failure is not an option. Failure is not an option. not an option. That's right. So super big thinkers next week, just like this week. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you so much for watching. We're getting closer towards the end of the year. Please continue to recommend guests to us, and we'll do our best. We may not be able to fit them in the rest of the calendar year. We're approaching 1,200 interviews at Disrupt and getting closer and closer to our 400 episodes. So, but we'll do our best to make sure, working with our number one producer on earth, Al, to get your recommendations onto as early as hopefully next year. Ray, closing comments.
Hey, we got some surprises on the way. We'll share them in a little bit. We're doing some interesting thing with our video feeds, so you'll see them in a while. But hey, happy Friday, everyone. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next show.
See you next week.